Hey y'all, how's it going? Check it out. I'm doing my first ever web podcast here because what the world needs right now is another middle-aged dude doing a podcast from his house, spewing his ideas out into the webosphere. So here goes. I'm throwing my thoughts into the collective interwebs hat, and we'll see where this goes. So, topic today, real quick, just getting right to it. Want to clear up some misinformation about landrace cannabis, and specifically, what is landrace cannabis? There's a lot of misinformation, and unfortunately, some of the incorrect definitions are actually dangerous and could be harmful to different cultures and people around the world and have all sorts of negative repercussions. So just going to dive right into it and define what landrace cannabis is. So anyone who's curious, here we go. Okay, very important. Want to say what landrace cannabis, first of all, is not. Landrace cannabis is not, going to say it again. It is not wild cannabis. I've seen lots of videos, I've seen lots of people talking about landrace cannabis as though it's like a native species or variety of cannabis from a certain area, like Acapulco Gold or like Thai stick, that it just naturally was growing like out in the jungle or out in the forest, and that was the native variety of cannabis for that region. That is 100% incorrect. So landrace cannabis and the definition of landrace anything is actually a domestic breed. It means humans actually bred it and worked it. But let me read really quick. If you want to do, just to verify this, just do a quick Google search. And I'm just going to read from what Wikipedia actually says. So here we go. Landrace is a domesticated, repeat, a domesticated, locally adapted, often traditional variety of a species of animal or plant that has developed over time through adaptation to its natural and cultural environment of agriculture and pastoralism, and due to isolation from other populations of the species, land races are distinct from cultivars and from standard breeds. So that's what it is. It is landrace. So for cannabis, landrace cannabis is a domestic variety of cannabis that has just been isolated from other populations for a long time, and it's been shaped by a culture or a population plus the environment of that area or region, and over time it's become a completely unique variety of cannabis that has its own special traits, like its properties as far as how it grows, flowering time, but it also reflects what that particular culture was breeding that cannabis for, like what kind of effects did they actually want, or what flavors, or even the aesthetics, the structure, what color the plant is, what they value. So it's kind of interesting that these landrace cannabis plants not only reflect and adapt to the environment, so environmental conditions, weather and such like that, but also are the culture, the actual people who developed this, the landrace variety of cannabis. It reflects their cultural sort of aesthetics for effects, like their version of what a cosmic experience should be, or do they want an energizing cannabis that will give them energy and help them get through work, or a lot of times after work, so they can go out dancing and have more energy? Or is that culture looking to maybe be more relaxed and meditative and contemplative and maybe be quiet and not be bouncing off the walls, but maybe just be relaxed and meditating and deep in thought? And then strangely too, this isn't a landrace thing, but that's a question why here in the United States why is our cannabis, why are we valuing the effect of couch lock, of like a sedative, almost disassociative, a numbed out experience that's heavy and sort of debilitating, that kind of shuts your body down. Why is it? That's an interesting question to ponder. Why is that right now our cultural value or aesthetic for cannabis? I don't know why. But we also have a synthetic opioid epidemic going on in the United States. So why do so many people want to numb out and kind of not feel? So that's an interesting question. But anyway, I am rambling, so I'm going to get back on track here. So Landrace cannabis. Very important to know, it is fully domestic. It is totally influenced by humans and is bred by humans. So the humans and the environment are shaping the cannabis together. So when we get like an Acapulco Gold or a Thai stick, you're gonna find those genetics, because I grow a lot of landrace cannabis, and a lot of times I'm getting seeds just directly straight from where that landrace was developed. And to be quite honest, a lot of times our environmental conditions here in California are so vastly different from, let's say, equatorial tropical Thailand or Sri Lanka, that the plants, will kind of go through a period of shock, that first generation of seeds, because just the light spectrum, the weather, all the conditions, the soil, everything's just very different. So, but it's interesting. You get to know, and if you want to get woo-woo and energetic and such, you can also kind of feel the culture, like their energy, that's been infused into this plant. But it's really, really, really important to understand that landrace is generated, and it's a work. It's actually a craft and a work, and the genetics are a result of a lot of work, multi-generational, of certain cultures putting in a lot of work, a lot of time, effort, intention into developing those plants. And why it's dangerous for people to think, and this sort of myth or misinformation going on, that landrace is just wild cannabis or even native, that it just grows on the side of the road and such like that, that immediately devalues that culture that actually created that cannabis variety. And it sets up it sets up an environment where all of a sudden it justifies appropriation or stealing or theft without giving credit to that culture. So when all of a sudden, Western sort of conquistadors come and visit some remote area of the world and find this cannabis that these maybe sort of like indigenous cultures are growing, if the thinking is that this is just a wild plant that just nature just created, that sets up all of a sudden it's easier to sort of take that genetic, that work, that beautiful cannabis that this culture has actually developed over generations, and just be like, oh, they didn't do anything, or it was just growing and it's wild, and it's all of a sudden erasing a whole history and a whole culture that has put in, hundreds, if not thousands of years to get their cannabis to that point. And by the way, all the California hybrids or hot strains or the Dutch stuff, it's all based on landrace cannabis. They've just crossed, maybe taken an Acapulco and a Thai and an Afghan and combined them together. But the reality is 99% of that work was done by those cultures who got that cannabis to that already awesome level, and then just you know, hundreds if not thousands of years of work, and then all of a sudden some conquistador gets a hold of those genetics and then crosses them and then claims ownership. It's just it's kind of disrespectful, and I'm not trying to be sanctimonious or preachy or anything like that, but just it's important that we understand and acknowledge and respect that all of this amazing cannabis that we're able to appreciate and experience is really built on years and generations of really, really skilled cannabis genetic breeders who put a lot of thought and intention and energy. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So, and now there's sort of different categories, so I hope this makes sense. And I actually confirmed this with, if you guys know Robert Clark, who's an ethnobotanist who's dedicated most of his life to studying cannabis and the origins of cannabis. And by the way, if anyone's curious where cannabis came from, it seems right now the theory is basically 10,000-ish years ago, somewhere in there, somewhere in the China area, sort of near the Himalayas in China where that all meets, is that that's where probably the actual first wild cannabis was, and then humans learned of it and then domesticated it, and then it's just sort of been moving through cultures, through civilizations, and now it's a fully domesticated cannabis is a fully domesticated plant, and most likely most people who've been studying this believe that the actual original wild cannabis probably doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't mean it was killed or extinct, but it probably got hybridized by other domestic populations because people kept traveling through those areas. So it probably, species or varieties can go extinct, not through being killed off, but being hybridized. So it's kind of like with dogs. If everything was bred with a poodle and labradoodled or doodled, you know, eventually you wouldn't have any other of the original dog breeds. They'd all be doodle hybrid varieties. Anyway, if that makes sense. So there's landrace cannabis. Landrace cannabis is a unique variety of cannabis that is domesticated and grown by humans, but it's become unique because it's been isolated from other varieties of cannabis, and it's unique to that culture and to that environment where it's geographically the region it's being grown. So again, some examples of that would be, you know, let's say Acapulco Gold, different Afghan varieties, Pakistani varieties, Thai varieties, Cambodian. These are all, and if you put let's say a Thai landrace next to an Afghan plant, you will see they're incredibly different. The Thai, you know, is getting 15, 20 feet tall, has a super long flower time. It's got wisp, kind of airy buds because it's a tropical wet environment. So, you know, you don't want it to mold, so it needs a fluffier bud that air can ventilate through. And then you compare that to an Afghan variety, which is in, a lot of times if it's, you know, in a more mountainous region, it needs a very short flowering time because the weather is going to get cold and change, and it's a harsh environment. It's actually, you're going to have squattier, shorter, bushier plants. So that's just the environmental factors. But then there's also the cultural, what is that culture wanting the effects to be, and what do they value in the effects? So, and a lot of times the indicas will just have a more relaxing meditative effect. And for whatever reasons, a lot of the tropical equatorial varieties will have a much more energizing and electric effect. So I don't know why that is, but it's interesting, and that to delve into those. But you know what? Actually, that's not totally true. A lot of the old Afghan Soviet war, from what I've heard, is a lot of the Afghans there were more sativa-ish and actually a lot more energizing. So anyway, if anyone knows any information on that, let me know, because yeah, the indica types, or excuse me, the Afghan types may not have, like 50 or 100 years ago, may not have been as indica relaxing, a little more sedative variety. They may have been a lot more uplifting. Who knows? Anyway, if anyone knows, love to hear that. Okay, so that's what Landrace is. Now, there's also Heirloom. And Heirloom, I'm just going to read, tell you, I hope it's okay. This is actually Rob Clark wrote this because I asked him in an email. And he said, Heirloom, or traditional domesticates, often have direct landrace heritage, although they can also be early hybrids that over time have been recognized for special attributes and preserved with plants. With plants, these may be seed-derived annuals as cannabis naturally grows, or they more often are asexually reproduced like fruit and ornamental plant varieties, as well as modern sensimilla. So that means actually cuts, like clones. So a lot of heirloom cannabis, a modern heirloom cannabis, is actually passed as cuts, clones. They're not even being reproduced as seed, because a lot of times it's that one special cut or pheno that people then have preserved that mother, and then just keep taking clones off that and just keep it alive as a clone. So anyway, so Heirloom is more, so Landrace also will have a lot more genetic diversity. They'll all be similar, like you can tell it's they all have these properties where they're all similar, and you can tell, okay, yes, that's a Thai or that's a Cambodian. Yeah, definitely. You can see the general traits that are all similar and have similar effects, but they're not going to be just carbon copies of each other. So it's not modern breeding that's shooting for like a real narrow, stable, completely consistent product. And some examples may be like husky dogs are considered sort of like a landrace dog breed. So huskies come in all different colors. Some are bigger, smaller and such, but you can tell it's a husky, but they're not like a kennel club, dog show, pedigree, like exact measurements and size of haunches and all that ratio stuff that these purebreds get into. So Landrace has variety and variance, but they're all similar, just like a husky. You can tell it's a husky, but they're not carbon copies of each other. Hope that makes sense. And then the other category is feral. So a lot of people assume, like if they go on a trip to India or Nepal or such, they'll see cannabis just growing on the side of the road. Or, tell you the truth, if you go to Nebraska and some places in the Midwest here in the United States, you might see cannabis just growing what seems to be wild on the side of the road or in some like secret little valley. But that's not actually native cannabis that originated and evolved in Nebraska. That's just escaped feral cannabis. That means someone was farming, actually hemp, was farming hemp, and somehow a bird got a hold of the seeds, and then the seeds moved around, and now that cannabis or hemp, it's all the same really, has escaped and then now has a wild population. But it does not mean it's a native species that evolved in that area. It was introduced and now is feral. So it's just like a stray cat that you see, let's say in San Francisco, running around out in Golden Gate Park. That's not a wild cat that evolved in the San Francisco area. That was someone's pet cat that escaped, and then it had kittens, and now there's a feral population of cats. But you should not confuse that's a native species of San Francisco, the cat. That's a domestic cat that escaped and is now living wild, but it's feral. So I hope that makes sense. So we have landrace, we have heirloom, and then we have feral, and those are the different categories. But anyway, I am really rambling. I hope this makes sense, and I hope this actually clears up what landrace cannabis is. And by the way, I'm doing this as a podcast because unfortunately, with YouTube and other social media, whenever I do a video that's out next to a cannabis plant, their AI detectors immediately recognize cannabis leaves, and instantly the videos get restricted and over 18 only, and they don't get dispersed nearly as much as would like to, as far as spreading information, because now I'm in the podcast sphere and I need to spread my thoughts through the interwebs. So anyway, yeah, so we'll see where this goes. Just kind of rolling with it, no script, just rambling, but I hope that makes sense. I hope that this will help get rid of the misinformation that landrace is just wild cannabis, because again, that completely erases generations and generations of cultural cannabis genetics work by incredibly skilled cannabis and intuitive cannabis cultivators who have gotten cannabis to this super high vibin level. And by the way, personally, I think the most landrace cannabis is actually, the effects are superior to sort of the latest wave of modern hybrids. Like ever since 2010 or so, I think cannabis, unfortunately, it was kind of, for me, it was like, I was growing a lot of super silver haze, which is a actually it's a Dutch variety and such, but it still kind of had landracey feelings or effects. But then when cherry pie, I don't know if people have been growing for a while, when cherry pie came along, that was the first, for me at least, heavy strain that just had this couch lock effect. And then all of a sudden people were desiring couch lock and higher potency, and like it was like fun if you fell asleep or couldn't remember your name and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it went from cherry pie, then all of a sudden it was like cookies. And at the time I was also growing sour diesel, which was actually a very amplifying, uplifting effect. And then from then on, it's just kind of been this mishmash of more sedative and disassociative and sort of confusion effects where, yeah, a long time ago, back 80s, 90s, it was more silly and creative and kind of psychedelic and life amplifying, where it just heightened the experience instead of dulling and numbing it out. Anyway, and I think a lot of people sort of collectively are starting to realize that the new cannabis, like right now, 2025, most of the cannabis, especially the sort of industrial grown stuff that unfortunately is being carried in dispensaries because they think that's what everyone wants, but people are sort of collectively realizing that they don't really, a lot of people don't really care for the effects of just feeling lethargic and heavy and kind of stupid. So anyway, landrace cannabis is most of it is very clear, and it is inspiring, enlightening, silly, giggly, and creative, and just really sort of mind expanding and perspective shifting in just really interesting ways. So hopefully we may actually start seeing a resurgence of appreciation for landrace and those type of effects. But it's really important that if we start going that direction, that we absolutely give credit to the cultures who created these absolute masterpieces, and just big gratitude, credit, respect. And the last thing we want to see is all of a sudden sort of Western cultures trying to claim ownership, like appropriate, poach, or steal other cultures' amazing masterpiece, cannabis genetics. So anyway, something to contemplate. I grow a lot of landrace, but I'm just trying to show respect for those cultures, and I hope this video is also a part of that. And anyway, let's if anyone's inspired, let me know your thoughts. Love to have continue the conversation. Anyway, all right, I have rambled quite a bit. I thought I was doing a 5-minute video. Guess not. All right, bye y'all.